Michelle Godlewski, your emotional support American abroad, and I've moved abroad 3 times in the last 12 years. This is How to Move Abroad for people who don't need more inspiration, they need an actual decision and a checklist. Each week, I cut through the internet noise and walk you through the stuff that actually decides whether this happens or not. Every episode ends with a weekly task because collecting information isn't progress, and someday isn't a strategy. Let's get into it. Hey, I wanted to do something different today. I've been making this podcast for a while now, and I've talked about visas and budgets and trade-off and shipping and money and everything. I've given you frameworks and formulas and weekly tasks, and I honestly meant all of it. Every single bit of it is real and it matters, and it will help you move abroad if you let it. But today we're going to put that all down because I think some of you are carrying something that has nothing to do with visa requirements, and I think you've been carrying it alone, and I think if I don't say something about it, I'm doing you a giant disservice. So today I'm going to tell you the real reason I left, not the version I usually tell, the job offer, the relocation package, and all the adventures of it. Because while that's a great reason and it's part of it, it's not all of it. This is the one that I usually don't lead with because it's heavy and it's personal and it's not exactly podcast-friendly small talk that you want to hear. And I'm going to tell you what it cost me because nobody tells you that part either. I think so many of us tell you all the great parts about moving abroad, like the cobblestone streets and the healthcare and the work-life balance, but nobody tells you about the friends you're going to lose, the goodbyes that don't end, and the particular loneliness of choosing a life that people you love can't fully follow you into. And then after that, I'm going to tell you why I do it all again, every single solitary time. This one's not going to be as hoorah as some of the others or as practical as some of the others, but I hope it helps. So get comfortable. I was 30 years old when I found out I had breast cancer. I just want to let that sit there for a second before I keep going, because I've said enough times now that I can say it pretty cleanly, pretty matter-of-factly, but it wasn't always like that. There was a time when those words, breast cancer, 30 years old, life before your eyes, felt like the floor dropping out from underneath me. Like someone had reached into my life and rearranged the furniture in the dark, and I was standing there trying to figure out what I was hitting my shins on. The likelihood was that I would recover. I had stage 3, 2B3 breast cancer. The doctors were reasonably optimistic that with chemo, radiation, and a bilateral mastectomy, I would be okay. But reasonably optimistic is not the same as guaranteed. And when you're 30 years old and someone tells you that your survival is likely but not certain, something shifts in you that doesn't fully shift back. What shifted for me was this. I stopped being able to pretend that I had this unlimited time, that I could do anything forever. Before the diagnosis, I was living a life that looked fine from the outside. I had a job, actually a pretty good one. I was traveling a lot for work. Honestly, probably a little too much. My husband and I were ships passing in the night. We were technically living in the same apartment, but practically living in separate lives because I was always somewhere else. We had a house in Illinois that was underwater. We had debt. We had all the normal chaos of 2 people in their late 20s trying to keep everything together and not quite managing it. And I had this thing I did, the way I think about a lot of people probably do, where I told myself that one day I'd slow down. One day I'd travel less for work and travel more for pleasure. One day I figured out what this life we actually wanted was instead of the one that we had sort of accumulated around us. It was this one day mentality. And then cancer took one day completely off the table. When you're sitting in a doctor's office being told that your cells have literally turned against you, one day becomes right fucking now. Because what am I actually doing with my life right now? And I looked at my life, really looked at it, probably for the first time in a while, and thought, this isn't what I want it to be. This is not the life I would have chosen if I'd been paying attention. This is the life that happened to me instead of the one I planned on all the way around. And I had a choice in that moment. I could recover and go back to exactly the life that I had, or I could accumulate a new one. I could recover and actually choose something that mattered to me. I was told around the same time that I almost certainly would never be able to have children, like less than 0%, they said, which is a thing you hear and grieve and eventually make kind of peace with, or you try to. We thought, okay, cool, no kids. So what does our life look like? What mark do we make? What do we build this life upon? And the answer that kept coming back around and louder than anything else was, we go. We actually go. We stop talking about moving abroad and seeing what it would be like, and we actually do it. We stop waiting for the right time and we make it the right time. So we did. And just so you know, because life is wonderfully, bewilderingly unpredictable, the less than zero chance turned out to be wrong. My daughter is 8 right now and currently obsessed with ice hockey and has grown up in 3 different countries and speaks more languages than I do. And she is the best thing I have ever done. The doctors were wrong and life was right. But I tell you the full story because I want you to understand something. I did not move abroad because everything was fine and I was adventurous and I wanted a beautiful European life with cappuccinos. I moved abroad because I was 30 years old and scared and freshly aware that I was not invincible and I refused to spend whatever time I had living a life that I hadn't chosen. That is the real reason. But nobody tells you what that reason costs you. All the content about moving abroad, like the blogs and the YouTube channels and the Instagram accounts, and yes, even this podcast sometimes, we tend to focus on the getting there part, right? How do I get out? The logistics, the adventure, the new life, the things that are real. But I'm not going to pretend that's it, that that's everything that happens, because there is a cost to this that I don't hear people talk about enough, honestly. And I think some of you need to hear it before you go, not because I want to scare you off, because I think it's a great idea to move abroad, but because and without knowing it means it hits you harder than it needs to. I lost so many friends from moving abroad, not gradually and not theoretically. I literally lost them. People I had known for years, people I thought were lifers, people I would have told you were my people, and like, oh my gosh, I can go to them for anything. When I moved and then kept moving and then made it clear that we weren't coming back, that we weren't in a holding pattern waiting to return to our real life in the United States, that this was our real life. Most of them couldn't follow us into it. And I can understand why. I do. Lives diverge. Friendships need proximity to stay alive, and we removed the proximity. They were having babies and buying houses and going to the same restaurants and building a shared context that we were no longer a part of. And we were doing the same, just somewhere else in a context they couldn't access. You can only stay close across that kind of distance for so long before the connection starts to thin. But understanding it doesn't make it not hurt at all. I have one friend from my American life, maybe two, who I still talk to pretty regularly. The rest kind of drizzled away. That's the word I keep coming back to. Not a dramatic falling out, not a fight or a betrayal, just a slow drizzle that one day you realize you haven't spoken in 8 months, or in my case, 8 years, and you don't have anything to say that would bridge the gap anymore. My best friend growing up, my next door neighbor, 20 plus years of history before we moved abroad, slumber parties and heartbreaks, all of it. I haven't spoken to her in 11 years. 11 years. We don't have much in common anymore. We're two people held together entirely by memories of who we used to be. And we both know it, and neither of us knows what to do with that. So we just don't. And that is one of the quietest griefs in my adult life. Some people couldn't understand the decision. Why wasn't America good enough? Were we better than everyone else? Did we think we were too good for the life everyone else was building? And I never knew how to answer that question because my answer wasn't about the United States being not good enough. It was about me needing to find what my life could be. Those are two entirely different things, but not everyone can hear that difference. And then there's my mom. Or my parents, but really my mom. Every time I say goodbye to her after she comes to visit or I visit her, every single time I hug her at the airport or take her at the door of her house or whatever we're saying goodbye at, there's this moment where I hold on a little longer than I need to, and I'm going to cry when I'm saying this because I don't know when I'll see her again. It takes planning and logistics and money and coordination and travel to get back and travel. It's not a 2-hour drive. It's a 9-hour flight and a layover and a full day of travel. And I'm not always able to go when I want to or need to. And God help me at 75 years old, I don't know how many more times I have left. When she's sick recently, really, really sick, and the hospital sick, I just can't be there. I have to figure out if I can afford the last minute flight, if I can get coverage at work, if my daughter can manage without me for a week, if and if and if and if. And meanwhile, she's sick in the hospital and I'm not there. And that distance is a weight I carry constantly, quietly in a place that I usually don't let people see. Every time I hug her goodbye, I wonder if it's the last time. I wonder if my daughter will have enough time with her Oma to remember her, really remember her, and not just in the photographs and videos that we took. I wonder sometimes in the dark and the honest moments, what happens if something goes wrong? If something happens to me, my husband navigating Swiss bureaucracy in a language he barely speaks, far from both of our families, trying to figure out how to manage everything without me. I don't stay in that thought for very long because it's not productive and it just mostly scares me, but it visits occasionally. It visits and I have to sit with it for a minute before I can put it down. This is the part of moving abroad that nobody puts on Instagram. I am not telling you this to talk you out of it. I'm not telling you this because I think you deserve something bad to happen. I'm telling this because I think you deserve to know what it's actually signing up for. Not the pretty fantasy version, not the horror version either, the real version, the one where it's genuinely, deeply, irreversibly worth it, and it costs you things that matter to you. Both of these are true at the same time, and they will continue to be true. And you have to be able to hold both of them simultaneously. Whew. Okay, now I want to talk about you. I know, or I guess, why you're here. I don't mean this podcast specifically. I mean, here in this particular chapter, Googling how to move abroad and listening to strangers on the internet talk about visa requirements at 11 o'clock at night when you should probably be asleep. You're here because something doesn't feel right. Not catastrophically wrong, maybe, not a cancer diagnosis or a crisis necessarily, but something. A growing, persistent, impossible to ignore sense that your life you're living is not quite the life you were meant to be living. That somewhere along the way you started following a script you didn't write. That you're tired, deeply, specifically tired, in a way that a vacation isn't going to fix. And you're watching the world right now and you're scared. Not abstractly scared, really fucking scared. The kind of scared that sits in your chest and doesn't fully leave even when you're doing something normal. Even when you're making dinner or watching your kid at practice or laughing at something stupid with your partner, it's still there. It's the low hum of something is wrong and I don't know what to do about it. And you've been feeling guilty about wanting out, like you're ungrateful or dramatic or selfish, like you should be able to find a way to just be okay with the way things are. Like wanting something different means you don't appreciate what you have. I need you to hear me on this. You are not ungrateful or dramatic or selfish. You're a person who is paying attention to the world around you. And what you're paying attention to is telling you something that you know is real. The wanting out, that voice, that pull, that persistent low grade knowing that there has to be something else, that is not a problem. That is information. That is the most honest part of you trying to get your attention. And I know what it's like to have everyone around you not understand it, to have people look at you like you're crazy or ungrateful or running away from something or ruining something good, to have someone look at you and say, why isn't America good enough? Like wanting a different life is a betrayal of the one you have. It's not. It never actually was. Wanting a different life is not a rejection of the people you love. It's not a statement about about America or the United States or about gratitude or about anything other than you needing a life that you want. It's just the truth of who you are and what you need and what you can see from where you're standing, and you're allowed to act on it. I want to address the specific voices, the ones in your head that are already building the case against this. But Estelle, I don't have enough money. I know we talked about this for a while in this podcast, and so go back to those episodes if you need more about money. But I'll say it one more time anyway. The number you actually need is most certainly not what you think it is. It's a buildable number. It's specific. It is not necessarily $20,000 by default. Run the math. Get your number. It will probably be smaller than the one your fear invented inside your head. Maybe you're telling yourself, I can't do this to my kids. I'll be honest, your kids are watching you right now. They're watching how you handle a life that isn't working. They're learning from you what it looks like to want something and either go after it or quietly give up on it. Taking them abroad does not damage them, it expands them. It shows them that the world is bigger than the one country's version of normal. That is not a thing you do to your kids. That's a thing you do for your kids. You're going to probably tell yourself, but everybody's going to think I'm crazy. And some of them absolutely will. I cannot fix that for you. What I can tell you is that people who matter, The ones who love you in the way that survives distance and difference and a life that diverges from their own, those people will come with you even when they can't physically follow. And the ones who can't handle it were probably already on the way out at some point anyway. There's the question of what if it doesn't work out? Then at least you tried. You will have chosen your life instead of letting it happen to you. You will have shown yourself and your family that you are someone who acts on what matters. And you will have more information than you do now about what you actually want and need. That's not a failure, that's living a life. Maybe you're thinking, like I do occasionally, what if something goes wrong? I guarantee you something will go wrong. I promise you something will go wrong. There's no doubt. It went wrong for me multiple times in multiple countries, and I figured it out. Not perfectly, not without cost, honestly, but I figured it out. And so will you, because that is what people do. You figure it out. You're figuring out how to live in a situation right now that you hate, and yet you're still figuring it out. Then there's the question of, but Mistelle, I don't know where to start. Well, first of all, you're listening to this podcast. That's why you're here. You don't have to know where to start. You just have to start, whatever that is, the next small thing, the one thing after this episode. That's all. That's all you have to do to get started. I live in Lucerne, Switzerland, or outside of Lucerne, Switzerland now. And I've lived here for a little over 5 years and abroad for a total of 12. I've moved multiple times across countries with a husband and 2 cats, and eventually with my daughter, who has never known a life that didn't include at least 2 languages and a passport with stamps in it. My life is not perfect. I still worry about money. I still have bad days. I still miss people I can't get back to easily. I still wonder sometime about the friendships that drizzled away and whether there was something I could have done differently. But here's what I do know 100%. I know that I'm living a life I chose. Not the one that accumulated around me while I was busy doing other things. Not the one someone else mapped out and handed me. One I looked at and said, yes, this is what I want. I know my daughter is growing up in a world that is big and manageable and full of people who do different things differently. That different is not wrong. That is worth everything to me. I know that I used whatever time the cancer gave me back to me. I didn't put it in a drawer and keep doing what I was always doing. I spent it on the life I wanted, on the people I love, on a version of myself I actually recognize. And I know the fear that I felt before my first move, the terror of it, the lying awake, the what the are we doing? And this is absolutely insane. That fear was not a warning. It was just the feeling of growing out of the skin I was in, of doing something that mattered before I knew how it would turn out. It turned out not perfectly, that's for sure, not without cost, but it turned out. And if I had stayed, if I had let the fear win, if I had listened to the people who didn't understand, if I had kept waiting for my one day moment, I probably would still be waiting. I know that with absolute certainty. Honestly, I wouldn't have my daughter either. I'd probably be 50 years old and still telling myself one day. I am not willing to be that person, and I don't think you are either, or you wouldn't still be here. I always give you a weekly task at the end of every episode, and this week is no different. This week, but I don't want you to actually research anything. I want you to think about whether you write it down if you're a journaler, or you speak it as a voice note, or you just kind of talk aloud to yourself about it. I want you to do it just for you, not for me, not for Instagram, not for your partner or your mom or anyone else who has opinions about your life. I want you to think about the life that you actually want, not the logistics, not the visa or the budget or the shipping, the feeling of it. What does a regular Tuesday look like to you? What have you stopped being afraid of? What does your kid look like in it? What does it feel like to wake up and know that you chose that particular life? Whether you write it down or you make yourself a voice note of it, I want you to keep it somewhere where you'll find it when the things that you're doing right now get hard, because I guarantee you it's going to get hard. And when it does, you're going to need to remember why you started. One statement, one paragraph, whatever it is right for you of the life that you want. Then come back next week and we're going to keep building ourselves toward it one little piece at a time. This is the story that I don't usually tell. The real one, the one that I kind of hide in the back of the closet when I don't want to talk about it. But I felt like it was only fair to tell you my real story. If something in this episode made you feel less alone, if you heard yourself in any of it, please feel free to share it. Not for me, but for the person in your life who is carrying this quietly and hasn't told anybody yet, who is lying awake at night and scared and wanting out and feeling guilty about all of it. Send it to her because she needs to hear it. You can always find me on Instagram. Tell me about what your dream life looks like. Tell me about the life you wrote down. I genuinely, truly would love to know, and I'd love to figure out how to help you get there. And if you're ready to start building toward it, really, really building with a plan and a timeline and an actual path, go back to the beginning of this podcast, season 2. We've already laid the foundation. The rest is just the doing of it. So we'll keep going as we go through. I will see you next week. You deserve the life you choose. So please go build it. Thank you, friend. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in to A Broadly Speaking. If today's episode got you dreaming a little bigger or thinking a little braver, go ahead and hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's ready for their own adventure. And hey, don't be a stranger. Come hang out with me over on Instagram at @IamEstelle for the real, unfiltered life abroad. Keep that passport handy, and remember, life's too short to stay in one place.